Hello and welcome back to the Cinch YouTube channel, where today our attention is on the model year 2024 Polestar 2. Now, the brand reckon this thing has more power, more range and more fun. So let's hit the road and see if it lives up to those expectations. Now, we know loads about the Polestar 2. Number one, because we have so many on Cinch, and if you like them, make sure you check them out. The link is in our description to see the stock we have there. But this is the model year 2024 car, which does get a few changes. Now, the biggest changes are technology and powertrain, but when it comes to the aesthetics, well, it's basically the same. There is a new front section here, which actually houses all of the technology to give you your driver assist functions, and then you've also got new wheels as well, like the 20-inch wheels on this car. Oh, and also in the pre-update car, all of the electrical focus was at the front of the car, but in this updated car, the drive and the electric motor has gone from here to here, the rear wheels. So that means this car now, with the single motor setup, is a rear wheel drive car. So I think it's going to drive pretty nicely. But before we hit the road, I think we should check out the interior, because there have been some uplifts in there as well. Now, this interior, well, it was already lovely in the Polestar 2 before the update, but now it's really gone up another level. I mean, the fit and finish is excellent. All right, you're not Rolls-Royce in terms of the lambswool carpets and stuff you get in those cars, but the materials in here, firstly, are all sustainable, and really Polestar focuses on minimizing its carbon footprint during production. So it means you've got these vegan materials in the car, but everything is just put together really well. I mean, normally infotainment screens squeak when you rattle them, but that is rock solid on the dashboard there, and everything just feels excellent. I wish we could help you to feel this through the camera, but you can't. Just trust me, it's lovely. And the quality of the build as well. There are no rattles when you drive. There's nothing in the way of flexible parts in this interior. And also, the infotainment system is really, really very good. Like many cars now, or a growing number of cars, it uses Google software. And that means you've got voice control that actually works. For example, hey Google, play Virgin Radio.
Playing Virgin Chilled on radio.
There you go, super easy, and it means you can also ask for directions and get taken to wherever you want to go. If you're taken to a location, the sat-nav won't just let you know how to get there the best way and the most efficient way, but it will also take into account whether there's food and charging stops on the way. This thing is so easy to use, and it remains really comfortable in the back as well. So the seats, you've got lots of room in there. Yeah, I see what you mean, Sam. And the boot in this car is super generous. I thought the movement of the electric motor to the front and the rear, well, maybe having that rear motor would take up some space, but it just hasn't. There's a boot with loads of room and loads of underfloor storage as well. So as a comfortable, practical car, this thing is really very good. Although, given that this thing is a rear-wheel drive and quite powerful model, also something that's very important is how it drives. So let's find out. Yeah, you can definitely feel that this Polestar 2, with its updates and now with its rear-wheel drive, it feels a little bit quicker. It's not massively fast, it's still over 6 seconds to 62 with this single motor model, but now it feels enjoyable and exciting to put your foot down. Now, Polestar is promising and has claimed that this thing is the most fun and engaging car they've ever produced. They haven't made many cars, of course, but that's still a pretty big statement given the Polestar 1, which did come as a hybrid and with an engine. Well, that thing was very fun to drive indeed. So this has a bit to live up to, but I can tell you from driving this thing all morning, it rides brilliantly, and I'm not even kidding. I think this is the best riding car I have been in that costs under 80 or 90 grand. I mean, this thing starts just over 50K, but it feels really, really solid on the road. I mean, you can go over bumps and potholes, cat's eyes. I've even dropped a wheel, and these are big wheels, by the way, 20 inches on this car. And then if you drop them into a hole, yeah, okay, there's a bit of a thud, but it is really, really good at smothering out the bumps. It just glides over the surface. And the same is true for when you go around bends. It just corners so flat and nice. It really makes mincemeat of everything you throw at it. Now, the biggest change, of course, for the single motor car is that the motor that powers it now lives at the back of the car, not at the front like it did on the pre-update cars. Now, if you just drive around at normal speeds, you probably wouldn't notice the difference. Whether you're being driven from the front or the rear isn't a big deal at lower speeds. But what matters is when you start to enjoy the car at higher speeds, it's going to affect the balance and the way the power can be put down. So we'll test that in a little bit when we find some corners. But on a flat and straight road, the car does feel nicely balanced. It feels like the weight distribution, obviously the battery being low in the car, feels sporty. Now, with a bigger battery as well, we are in the extended, the longer range car, so it's got 82 kilowatt hours of battery. That's not the biggest out there in the world, and there are models from Tesla, for example, which have 100 kilowatt hour batteries, but we've got 406 miles of claimed range. Now, we haven't seen that on the dash today, but that's because this car didn't come to us fully charged, but I did see well over 300 miles. And what I'll say is that it is decreasing the mileage at a really, really accurate rate. The rate now, we've got 240 miles left and we've done well over 60 miles since we got this car. And Polestar has said that the software it's using to calculate the range is much better now, much more accurate. I don't think it was ever a problem in the previous version, but clearly now we're getting to a point where your range on your dash is very, very trustworthy. That said, if you do need to charge the car, now this thing will charge at a faster rate. It means it will take less time to charge and you can use a more powerful plug. It means that you don't have to worry too much if you do have to charge the car, although 406 miles, how many of us are doing that in one sprint these days? Now, this 2024 range prices start at just under £45,000 if you go for the normal range battery, but if you go for this longer range battery, well, you're looking at closer to £52,000. Well, that seems like quite a lot of money, but you do get a really premium feeling car here. Firstly, I'm sat in a cabin, which is a very nice place to be indeed. And the way this thing goes down a road, it rides perfectly, as I said, but it's just so calm and quiet, and all of the quality of the build really, really shines through. All right, so let's see how the slight change in balance because the motor at the back affects the handling. I'm on a twisty road now. Let's thread it into this bend. I mean, straight away, the car just feels so lovely and evenly footed over the surface. As I said, the ride remains terrific. But what I want to feel is if you can play with it, you can actually set the ESC, the stability control, to a sport mode, which should give me a bit more playfulness when I put my foot down around a corner. But actually, there's just so much grip. These tires on these big wheels, there's just an enormous amount of traction and grip. And on a warm, dry day like today, well, it's just very, very hard to actually play with the car. The car just feels like it wants to grip and turn. It really does that very well. The car is nice and planted, but it's not too stiff. It doesn't feel completely hunkered down. There is a nice little bit of body roll, which is good. It actually makes the car feel alive and like a real car, not like some kind of track car. But it does also mean that if you're seeking a car that's really playful, you're gonna have to drive it so fast to get to that. So on the road, that's basically impossible. So really, it does add a little bit of fun to it. I think a little bit of better balance perhaps because the weight's moved a bit to the rear. But at the same time, it just remains a very, very grippy, very stable car. Now, when we come into a village here, if I slow it down, we can start to talk about just how quiet this thing is when you're going at lower speed. On the motorway, it's really quiet, but there's a tiny bit of wind noise over the mirrors. But that's mainly because everything else in this car is silent. You get the tiniest of whines from the motor, but now it's moved to the rear of the car. The whine is very, very low indeed. And of course, you're going to be driving with the radio on or talking to your passenger. So I'm sitting here in silence to listen to the stuff, and I'm having a really hard time to find those noises. Wind noise over the mirrors is the only thing you really notice, but at low speed now, I could be in a library. It's really quiet, and the fit and finish of this interior, there are not even the slightest hints of creaks and rattles. Okay, here's a bend. Let's let the car get up to the speed limit and see if I can feel it do anything in the corner. Flick it in. Just grip and positive on turning. It's very nice indeed, but you know what? I would consider getting the smaller wheels with slightly less grip because I feel like this thing has fun to offer, but you just have to drive it so fast to achieve it. And of course, with all those driver sensor controls at the front and with all the assistance features this car has, not only is it really calm and really nice to be inside it, but it's also really easy as well. There's so little to do if you want that to be the case. The steering can be really light. The brake modulation as well is very, very good. And you can drive basically with one pedal if you allow the regenerative tech, the tech that puts energy back into the battery, to be at its strongest mode. Really, this car can basically take most of the hard work out of driving, while also, if you wanted to, be quite fun and quite enjoyable around the bends. I just wish it would let me play a little bit more at lower speeds, but that's probably a bit too much of an ask. These days, people want grip and stability in these kind of cars, and this thing certainly has those in massive, massive amounts. So the Polestar 2 with its updates really has lived up to expectations. It's really lovely to drive, it rides beautifully, and yeah, you can feel the difference of that balance. Having more of the weight at the rear and the drive at the rear, I definitely think it's improved the steering and the way the car feels into bends, but of course it's still very stable and very secure. If you want to play with this car, the only time you're going to be able to do that is maybe accelerating from a standing start. Otherwise, it's just super safe and quite nippy as well. I think that's probably perfect for the type of buyer who goes for this car, although myself, I would like maybe to try maybe a slightly smaller wheel just to take away a bit of grip and unlock a bit of agility. Anyway, either way, this thing is very lovely. That interior is my favorite. It's so nice, and the quality, fit and finish everywhere on this car is top notch. So great job, Polestar. What do you think though? Do you think this car is a super hit, or do you think that there's still better out there? Let us know in the comments below. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to click the subscribe button as well. Oh, and if you like Polestars, don't forget that we have loads on Cinch as well. We've got a link in the description. You can find them all there.